you ever started a track, found a kick sample that you really love, but you just can't get it to sound right in your mix? I know I definitely have. In today's video, I'm talking about 3 techniques that I use to give my kicks that punch, weight, and definition that I'm looking for, all without using expensive plugins. As usual, we're back in Ableton, and I've got this quick loop that I threw together with some drum samples, as well as some instruments and effects that I've made. The hats and the percussion are just samples from my own library that are going into some effects chains that I've built. And the bass line is made with my latest Ableton rack that I just shared last week. This bassline rack, as well as the effects on that percussion, are available on my Gumroad if you're interested, link in the description. So let's break down how I've processed this kick. If you're not using them already, you might want to pop on some headphones so you can hear what's going on down the low end here. Without my FX chain, the raw kick sample sounds like this. Doesn't sound horrible, but I thought it could sound a lot better. This is what it sounds like after all the processing that I did. The original sample had this really nice punch and transient feel around this sort of 100 to 200 hertz area. And that's something that I'm always looking for in a good kick sample. But when it was played with this deep hypnotic bass and that percussion, it kind of lacked a lot of low end definition, weight, and the ability to kind of cut through with that percussion at the same time. So I'll show you what I did and explain why. I personally often try to avoid using Ableton's drum bus because the drive circuit here to my ear just sounds awful. But the boom section here, on the other hand, is something that I find is really perfect for adding weight and definition to kicks and toms, any percussion in the low end, for example. What I like to do is push the boom control just enough to give the kick a deeper sub presence. This adds low end without muddying up the rest of the mix. It's quite precise. Be careful to make sure that you tune the frequency of your boom to match the frequency of your kick. And all I mean by that is making sure that the dominant frequency of your kick matches the frequency that you have set here on your drum bus. And then carefully tune the decay and the boom here so that the drum bus isn't doing too much and getting in the way of any sub that you're adding with your bass line, for example. So have a look on span here and see how the kick is being affected by the boom we're adding with the drum bus. You notice the kick gets fatter and more solid, and it has more of a definitive position in the sub frequencies, which is often what I'm looking for when my kick just isn't cutting through my bass. Now that I've added some boom and weight to the bottom of my kick, I want to clean that up a little bit and make it a bit more present. The trick up my sleeve that I use for this task is Subfilter by Brainworks. This is a completely free plugin that you can get on Plugin Alliance. I'll pop a link to this in the description so you can give it a try. Subfilter is essentially like a resonant high-pass filter that helps control the sub-frequencies even further and avoid any unnecessary rumble sort of below where the kick's playing. I've used this in this example because our bass sort of extends past the bottom of that kick and I didn't want those two frequencies to clash. You're basically focusing the energy exactly where you want it and tightening the kick so it doesn't swamp your low end. Carefully dial in the low end control and the output gain to make sure that the sub bass is punchier and not just louder. I like to set the resonance to low, tune the tight punch to that same frequency on the kick, and then dial in these 2 dials until I get the result that I'm looking for. So the effects are really subtle, but I'll show you an A and B test so you can hear the result. Finally, I'll often add a click layer on top of my kick. A click layer is just a short, high-frequency transient that adds a bit of attack to your kick and helps it cut through the mix, particularly when there's a lot of high-end percussion going on. With this tip, good sample selection is really key. What I'd recommend doing is experimenting with 3 or 4 different click samples and saving them to your sample library so that every time you start a new project, you can try each one of those on top of your kick and try to tune them to match the sound of your kick. The click that I added sounds like this. And together with my kick, this is what it adds to the full sound. This is especially useful in techno and other dense electronic genres where the transient often gets buried in the mix. But as a side note, I would say use this sparingly and only if you feel like the kick is lost with everything else playing. What I like to do is save trying this until I've got some percussion and other high-end elements going in the track, add a click layer onto the kick at that stage, and see if I like the result. Here's the impact that adding that click layer had in this example. So, quick recap. Use drum bus to add sub weight, but be cautious of overdoing it. Use the Brainworks subfilter to clean up and tighten that sub and add some additional punch. And add a sample as a click layer when you think some punch and clarity might be required. If you find this kind of content helpful, subscribe for videos like this every week. And if you like this sound and want to support the channel, there's a link to my production tools and sample packs below. Take care and stay creative. Bye.